Josie is our summer intern this summer, and she is actually a second-year industrial engineering student at Purdue University, but she has worked with FromThePage previously as a software engineering intern, and so this year she returned and focused more on kind of data and analysis and AI-related projects. So we're really excited to have her do this presentation about kind of the biggest project she worked on this summer, and so I'm going to let Josie take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hello. I am Josie Brumfield, and today I'm going to show you all of my work this summer with building a custom GPT specifically for metadata remediation. And this is a project that I like to summarize as 40 minutes to make, 40 hours to make it good. So we're just going to run through how we got to this idea, do a demo, what our body of knowledge is based on that's running our AI. How do you fix the errors that inevitably show up when you're working with AI? And then we're going to segue into building a custom GPT. So why would you want to? How do you build it? And then all of the tips and tricks that I learned and where you can find all of these resources. But first, let's introduce the wonderful and amazing Dominique Luster, who runs the Luster Company, which specializes in uncovering archival stories of marginalized communities. And she was also our archivist partner for this project and my biggest cheerleader here. So she is absolutely amazing. If you ever have a chance, definitely go chat with her. So, like many good ideas, this project started as bar talk. So Sarah Brumfield and Dominique Luster were having drinks at the IIIF conference in LA earlier this summer and talking about how Dominique uses AI in her business to help remediate metadata. And Sarah's response was that you could turn this into a custom GPT and make it a little faster and a little easier. But both of these people are professional women who don't really have the time to go mess around with this. So what do you do when you have a cool project and no time? You give it to your intern. So now I get a pretty cool intern project. So a brief note about both me and the data that we were using to test this. As Sarah said, I am a college sophomore studying industrial engineering. I am not an archivist. I do not specialize in metadata remediation. So I am very much coming at this from the technical side, not the archival side. Number two, our test data is made up. Sarah and Dominique asked 4 or 5 archivist friends if we could use their outdated metadata to test our custom GPT. But just like how no one really wants to air their dirty laundry in public, they also don't really want to air their dirty metadata. So I came up with all of our test data by sitting in front of a bookshelf, staring at the spines of the books, and by paying attention to road signs after dropping someone off at the airport. So I've tried to make this halfway to accurate, but it is fundamentally made up. So what is the foundational knowledge of this AI? So all of the foundations for this are publicly available guidelines that real humans have put a whole lot of time and energy into thinking through and writing up and making available to the general public. So this is one of ours. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, their university libraries, has a guide to conscious editing. That is one of our guidelines. The Harvard Medical School library also has a similar guideline. And these things are not new ideas. This is our oldest guideline. It is 2018, so still pretty recent, but people have been putting a lot of thought into this and publishing these things for the last 6 years at least. So this is the Montpelier Descendants Society, their rubric. And then we're also using Archives for Black Lives in Philadelphia and their description resources. And so these are all what is teaching our AI how to remediate metadata. All right, Sarah, if you could drop a link to the AI in the chat, but we are going to start a demo. And we're going to start at the GPT store. So I've just looked up CustomGPT store. And so you get here, and this is OpenAI's page, going through to the GPT store. So these custom GPTs right now are only available to GPT-4 users. That's how OpenAI has set it up. And none of the creators on here right now are making money off of these. They're just putting them out here. All right. Okay. So this is what you see when you look up my little metadata assistant. And we're going to get going. So our default suggested prompts are, how does the assistant revise metadata? This is what we're going to be starting with. And this is basically telling the AI, what do you think you should be doing?
Hey, can you do a Control Plus about 3 times to make the font on the screen bigger, please?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm not on my usual computer. Better? I will take that as a yes. Okay. So this how does the assistant revise metadata button fundamentally says, tell me, the user, what you think you ought to be doing and how you're going to do it. This button to the right, start the metadata remediation process, is, I know what you think you're going to do, I just want to jump right into it. So we're going to start with an explanation. Okay, as with all AI, an elephant in the room is privacy. So the way custom GPTs work is I, the creator, cannot see anything you say in your chats or any data that you put in. OpenAI cannot see anything that you put in. And I have opted out of letting OpenAI train their models on your data. So this is directly from the OpenAI website, and this is their official policy on this. Okay. This is how the custom GPT works to revise metadata. So I've instructed it to focus primarily on revising titles and descriptions. So its first job is to find those and get the user to confirm them. This is to review what is in the metadata spreadsheet and try to get an idea of what's going on there, if there's any consistencies, if you're working with metadata from a specific set of papers, then hopefully it will pick up that it is so-and-so's papers talking about such and such. And then this, number 3, is basically take all of these human written guidelines that people have put their time and effort into doing and figure out how to apply these conscious editing guidelines to whatever you put in. So again, we list out all of our conscious editing guidelines from UNC, Harvard Medical School, the Montpelier Descendants Committee and their partners, and our Archives for Black Lives. This one is make sure that the user has some idea that you've changed the data and try to give them an idea of what they've changed. So we're trying to emphasize transparency and actually letting you see what the AI is doing. This ties back into our conscious editing guidelines. And then this, it does, without this little preserve the original intent and emphasis on maintaining the metadata as it was put in, it does like to go off and, you know, add some things and change some things. And sometimes it will try to go sanitize things. And that is not what you want. So you're trying to make sure that it keeps as close to the actual message of the metadata as it can. And then this last one is make sure you check back in with the user on a regular basis and ask for help. So this is an example process. This is from these titles, and the revisions are based on the examples that Dominique Lester, who I introduced earlier, wrote up for us. And then it went off and based on that came up with a description itself. So this is just an example that it came up with and is reviving. All right. So we're going to go into actually revising metadata. So this is the data that I wrote up, and it's starting to list out all of the columns. So yes, we have title, location, description, county, and year. It's got all of those, and we do want it to revise these. So yes, this sounds good. So now it is going to chart, and now it's going to pull out the first 10 lines of the description, or pull out the first 10 lines of the spreadsheet and try to revise them. So you really, really want to pay attention to the spreadsheet. Sometimes it will pop up tables over here. And the tables will be wrong in new and interesting ways, where the spreadsheet will actually be a lot closer to what you want it to do. And the spreadsheet is what gets exported at the end. So you do want to try to pay attention to the spreadsheet. Okay, so I know this data pretty well, and it's missed this. Actually, no, okay, so this is not started revising it at all. This is just listing out the first 10 lines. So yes, this is the first 10 lines of spreadsheet. Okay, we're going to tell it that yes, we want it to start revising. Let's see this. Okay, so we're gonna see whether it pops up a spreadsheet for us to look at, but if it doesn't, we will just go through and ask it to do so. And this is an excellent time to talk about the problems that show up with the chat. So for example, we have this is our original description, and I know where a lot of these problems are. And you'll notice here, this is supposed to be the same original description. It should be a word for word copy, and it has shortened it into something slightly more incorrect. So it's now provided a spreadsheet for us. It's keeping blabbing. It likes to do that. And so now we start getting actual revisions. So let's go through and see if it has completely missed something that we think it shouldn't. So I'm going down revised title right now and checking to see this. It didn't really need to change it, but okay, fine. And then going through revised description. So you'll notice this thing right here is not the same. It's been changed pretty considerably. So this is one of the biggest problems with trying to work with revising spreadsheets in general, is it likes to hallucinate and change things. So we're going to try to tell it that this is incorrect and ask it to do it again. This is a revision. So we've selected the problem cell, and this may or may not work. We'll see. These copy errors, which I ran into a whole lot building these, can be rather difficult to get the AI to fix. So as you can see, this still has the same problem, but yeah. This is the downfall of working with AI. So we're gonna go back to this thing and just check and see if there's any other things that we think we should change. I will point out that this, when I was writing it, I made some spelling errors and it did automatically go in and correct that. So that's something that I at least appreciate. This is another example of some sanitization. It decided that it didn't like talking about what was in the description here, and it changed it. Same problem here. All right. We're just going to ask it to try the next 10 entries and see if it gets any better. It might not. Okay, so we're automatically on the next set. And so this one is looking a lot better. So going through the revised title, this is one that I wanted it to change, and it did that while maintaining the general idea. And we're going to go through the descriptions, see if there's any errors there. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of these being major problems. So no copy errors this time. The joys of AI and its unpredictability, you know. So this all looks pretty good. Okay, we are going to finish this up again in a second, but I do want to talk about the general easiest ways to fix problems. Again, as you saw, copy errors are difficult to fix, but we're going to go through different other kinds of problems. So in this one, we're kind of doing a general replacement. There is a phrase that I want it to find and change through this entire set of lines. And so I go, please change blah into blah. And then its job is to go through and find all of the instances of the phrase that it needs to change and change it. Sometimes it gets this first try, sometimes you need to go back and say, hey, this thing over here, you forgot about that. Go put it back in, please. So that's one method of fixing problems in spreadsheets. Another method is going, this entire set, I don't like what you did with it. Try again. And so this is a very general, this is a problem, fix it. We're not telling it how to fix it. We're just pointing out that there is a problem and that it needs to be fixed. This tends to work pretty well. And then for our last method of easy, simple fixes in this spreadsheet work is you can click on a cell, and you probably saw me do this. You can click on a cell and it shows you, let me get my laser pointer out, and it sticks this thing in front of your little input typing space. And so hypothetically, this is telling it to refer to that cell in the spreadsheet specifically. And then you can tell it to do such and such thing to this cell and this cell only. This is a less reliable method of fixing things than the other two. It does tend to not pay attention to that specific cell every once in a while, but it is a much easier way to target a very specific problem. And as you saw with all of the errors, you really, really, really need a human in the loop. You need a human to go through and review it line by line every time, as much as possible. Turn off the laser pointer. So we're going to go back to our chat, and I'm just going to run through it really quick, the rest of this, and try to point out any of these specific fix-its as they come up. So no. I thought I told it to do something, but it didn't. Okay, and I'm briefly reviewing some of the questions in the chat. We'll have more time for this later, but asking the GPT to highlight the changes it's made. No, I don't think there's a way to do that within the spreadsheet, but you can try to get it to emphasize what it's done in the chat, but as you saw, that's not always reliable. We'll keep going through some of those later. All right, so this is the last of our data set. It's a small data set. So going down the titles, these are all right. Going down the descriptions. Last one at the end. So we have selected the cell, we are targeting a fix-it, but we are not really telling it what to do. Okay, so it told it to us in the chat. Okay, it's keep going. It's revising a little more now, but okay. There we go. That's pretty decent. So I know that it's done with the data, but I'm just going to check. Does it know that it's done with the data? And yes, we did skip a little bit of these revisions. All right, so it says it can't find any more. Interesting. So it's going back and checking. Let's So it thinks that it's done. We're going to ask it to give us a download link. So all right, and this was not working when I was testing it yesterday, so we'll see if OpenAI has fixed that. Great, okay, here we go. So we can just click this, we get a CSV spreadsheet that we can then work with. All right. So now we're going to segue away from this specific custom GPT and into building custom GPTs as a whole. So why do you want to put the time and effort into building a custom GPT? So if you are like Dominique and you use AI in your work a lot and you use it to help you with the same task all the time, going through the same thing, and you've developed a process for doing this, maybe you have saved prompts, a custom GPT is an excellent way to streamline that whole process. So custom GPTs are good for extremely specific tasks. They don't do great with build it for a specific task and then go ask it to do something else. It's not very good at that. But if you have a specific repetitive task that you are using AI for, this is a good and frankly kind of fun way to condense the time it takes to do that repetitive task. So we're actually going to do another demo in which we're going to build a little custom GPT. So we're going to just go back to this introducing the GPT store. Click on it, and up in this corner you can see both my GPTs and this big old create button. Okay, so this is how you build a custom GPT. We start off on this configure screen, so you can go in and manually add names, descriptions. This instructions section is pretty much what controls the entire custom GPT. You can specify conversation starters. It does like to reload these unless you go, don't reload it, don't make new ones, keep doing the same thing that you've been doing. This knowledge section is also very useful. So this is where we can stick all of our conscious editing guidelines in, or any other bodies of work that you want it to have consistent reference to, but you really don't want to stick into this instruction section. So this instruction section does have a character limit. It's a pretty large character limit, but you don't want to be sticking copy pasting entire PDFs into. All right, this thing right here was probably the single most important thing for building my custom GPT. This is what lets ChatGPT work with spreadsheets. It also lets the GPT do more data analysis by writing code and then running it and then analyzing the results. It's also good for helping it do higher math. So this thing right here is an excellent and amazing tool. You can also turn off your web browsing, your image generation. This is how this create an interaction is how you add an API. And then this additional settings is where you can turn off training data. So it will not use your conversations to train ChatGPT. So anything that runs through my custom GPT, this has been turned off. It is not being used to train ChatGPT. So we're just going to go through here, and these are all of my notes from building. And so this is my first prompt that I stuck in. We're just going to copy and paste it into this create side. So this is where you effectively program by discussion. You are going to program this GPT by talking to it, which can be really amazing and also really, really frustrating. So later in the week, ChatGPT does get a lot slower. And so you see this little purple circle here. This is one of my tips. Sometimes you will be talking with it, trying to get it to do stuff, and it will not do stuff. And so if you don't see the little purple circle, it doesn't do anything. All right, so it's now suggested a title and asks us if we like it. We're going to ask it to generate something else. And sure, this looks decent. So you can use this to build your logos. Yep, so it's asking us for a profile picture. We're gonna ignore that. So it should have populated this field with the name. There we go, okay. So it's given it the title, it's generated us a little profile picture. This instructions that we pasted into the create side start showing up here. And so all of this starts populating. Okay, so that is the basis of how you create a custom GPT. It's very simple. And then this preview on the side is how you test it before you actually send it out to something that people are using, or you save it fundamentally by pressing this create button, or once you've created it, here, we're just going to do this. Make it only me. But you can also share it with an organization via a link, or just put it into anyone on the GPT store. And once you're there, you have this update button so you can keep it up to date. Okay. So that is a very quick overview of how to build a custom GPT. So my little tips and tricks that I've learned working with this all summer. As I mentioned, if you don't see the little loading wheel where it says updating GPT, it's being sneaky and it's not actually doing what you want it to do. You can usually fix this by going, please add this to your instruction knowledge, and then it will go fix it. I mentioned the update button. This is very important because it lets you do version control. So I actually built an entire other custom GPT that we started off doing okay, got it to be doing pretty well on about my 6th or 7th revision of it. And then it started going downhill really, really fast. And so if you are updating, if you are publishing after every significant revision, you can go back and revert your custom GPT into the previous version that wasn't as messed up, which is a very, very useful skill. I did not do this enough with my first one. Another very useful tool is the technical document. So this is my technical instructions document. And right now, its primary purpose is to hold examples and guidelines that I don't want to stick into the instructions. So this is sort of a workaround to the character limit on your instructions. So this section right here is giving it an outline of what I want included every time the user asks it to explain what it's supposed to do. And now I did not actually come up with these. I asked it to do an explanation. one time and it just turned out really, really well. So I copied all of the headers and just stuck it in this document and said, do that every time. And it usually does. This I stuck in here because you would try to get it to start and it would go blabbing on and on and on and on. And that was very annoying. So I stuck this in and that pretty much fixed the problem. And then these are a bunch of example revisions that Dominique provided for us. She wrote these, and then I went through and tried to deconstruct why the revisions were good. So it uses these to kind of see what a good revision should look like. However, I did learn that if you stick these examples directly into the instructions, it will just try to copy them word for word. It will not actually do any thinking on its own. It will not try to apply things specific to your tasks. It will just go, oh, I have examples. People like the examples. Let me just show them this every time. And that's really not what you want. Another very, very useful thing is having statistics. So every time I ran a new version, every time I published it, I did a test run on it. And then this is just the results for some of them. And then I color coded it to make it easier on myself. And then I have these things, which are statistics of how accurate I think it was. So this is just a very simple numerical way for me to compare different revisions to help me decide that, oh, 2 revisions ago, it's been going downhill ever since then. Maybe I should go revert it back. But this is a nice numerical way to see that. So, and I think the best tool is keeping a document of notes. So this was all of my notes for both revision or both entire GPTs. So this is the chat that the example chat that I really liked. So all of these review original content, apply conscious editing guidelines. These were what I stuck in the technical instructions document. Sometimes you have notes with so bad it did not actually even go into the statistics, and somehow even worse. So these are usually this upper section is notes that I took while I was chatting with it. I would put a thing in, read it, and then go in and be like, oh, it decided to sanitize a bunch of stuff, or oh, it did really well now. And then I would make a checklist of things to try to get it to do on my next revision. And then my last and best piece of advice is don't be afraid to do what programmers call nuking it from orbit. You can take the entire thing and just decide that it's terrible and that you've learned a lot making it, but that it's a giant mess and it would be better for you to start over again. I did that last Friday. A week before this presentation, I had been working on my previous one for a month and a half. And the new one went so much faster, worked so much better, and it took me maybe 4 hours to get it up to be a functional thing that I was willing to put out into the world. So you can completely restart. That is very, very useful. All right, so as we went through, you can find this on the CustomGPT store, or Sarah, if you could drop the link in the chat again. And I'm going to start going through questions from the chat.
So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and Josie or I'll queue them up for her to answer. It's a lot of data, right? There's a lot of work Josie did here, so I think she did a great job.
Okay, so Tina Marie Mays asks, are there instructions on how to describe the changes you want to see? It looks like the instructions are very simplified. Also, could you ask to keep the dates in the revised descriptions to help it along? Interesting. Okay, so keeping the dates and the revised descriptions, you absolutely can ask it to keep the date column in the working spreadsheets. The way it's set up to export spreadsheets is so that it basically takes the entire spreadsheet that you gave it, dates, titles, descriptions, locations, anything that you put in, and then just add an extra revised blah column for whatever you asked it to revise. So your final exported spreadsheet will still have all of the dates and locations and anything else in your original spreadsheet. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, enslaved individual cabin.
Josie does not comment on how to actually revise metadata. If Dominique wants to comment on whether she'd change that or how she'd change that, I don't know. So yeah, and you can put it, once you decide the right thing to do, you just add it to that technical instructions document to try to get it to do the right thing, or you ask it just to fix the individual cell, right?
It's also can sometimes mess up on the like grammar sentence construction aspect of it. So it will make it sound a little bit weird because it's changing words around without changing the rest of the sentence. Dominique, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's actually what I was just going to type in there, that it isn't thinking the way that we're thinking. It is responding to ones and zeros. And so oftentimes I found that it would simply replace language rather than create a sentence that made sense. So we would not, if we're using the word, we're not going to use the word slave, we're going to use enslaved person. And so when you teach it to do that, it just full swaps things in ways that do not make sense for human language. So you really have to understand that it doesn't understand, it's following rules. And English is a really challenging language because there's an exception to every rule.
Mm-hmm. And this is where the instructions document comes in handy, because it's a way to give it more specific guidelines for more specific cases without having to dedicate your actual like instructions space.
So to kind of re-emphasize something, this is public if you pay for ChatGPT. So if you pay to get ChatGPT 4, you can use this. The link that we keep dropping in the chat, just go to that or go search metadata remediation in the CustomGPT store. Nothing you put in there would Josie be able to see, or ChatGPT OpenAI be able to see. But if you feel like sharing, there's a way to share chats. There's a little box with an up arrow. And if you're comfortable sharing experiments you're doing with this or things that you're trying to make work, you can send them to Sarah from the page, or I don't think we have Josie's contact information anywhere, but I can definitely get it to her. And that's how we can make this better, right? But really, this is almost a proof of concept of, how can we use ChatGPT to actually help archivists. And so it's very interesting to us to see if people would be willing to use this and if it actually is useful and helpful.
And like, if you have complaints, please complain. Please complain. Like, as a technical person who tries to build these things, one of our biggest problems is that people have complaints and they don't tell us. And if we don't know that the problems exist, we can't fix them. And we want to fix the problems. So please complain. Like, please complain.
Sarah, you're muted.
SSK, what's your specific cataloging task? Because we spend a lot of time thinking about how could we apply AI to archivist workloads. So I would love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah, so I catalog poetry and we do a ton of original cataloging. So this is a library task rather than an archivist task, but it's related. And I have really gotten on the train lately of like for poetry books, we need to be putting table of contents notes in our catalog records. But there's usually like 50 in every poetry collection. So I've been like either hand transcribing them or like taking a picture with my phone and using OCR and then copy pasting that into a doc and then reformatting it. But it strikes me that a task like that with really specific parameters would be something that a GPT could help me do a lot faster. So the idea would be like a bunch of text, use OCR to transcribe it, and then format it according to the rules for the 505 field.
Right, and then maybe give you a spreadsheet to download it all at 50 of them at a time or something.
Yeah.
We did a webinar a couple of months ago. The University of Alabama folks came in and were talking about how they use ChatGPT to do metadata for things like songbooks. I would go look at that one. It's on our YouTube page, and to like that's where I would start is thinking about how they approached it, and then and a lot of it's just play around with it for a long time, and maybe you can develop a repeatable process.
Can you give me the institution name again? Sorry.
So it was University of Alabama. I'll go find it on the page and drop it into the chat here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Another question, have we heard of anyone using this with MARC records? It's possible that the University of Alabama presentation has MARC records. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, people are definitely, this is actually something ChatGPT and large language models are good at, is if you're like, I have this technical format, MARC is a technical format, right? So is JSON or HTML, one of these other things. Please translate this into this technical format. It actually is, that's actually one of its best uses. Let me go see if I can find that video I was talking about.
And Dominique says that she can get GPT to handle MARC very well. So.
And I'm only saying that because MARC specifically, it has such specific rules. Like each entry is a specific place, and I have found in my experiments that GPT can handle that very well. It understands rules, and MARC is rules based.
There might be something that handles MARC in the ChatGPT store. You can definitely go search for it.
We experimented with the translation of diplomatic language to semi-diplomatic and regular.
Sarah, you're muted.
Sorry, guys, I had YouTube start playing in the background, so I'm going to stay muted while I go to find that video.
I don't know if this is maybe a silly question to ask, but how has your experience been with punctuation and ChatGPT specifically? Because I found recently that some of the most tedious bits, some of the most tedious bits that I end up really having to handle on my spreadsheets is just wrangling semicolons and silliness like that. I think that seems like the kind of thing that would be really easy to automate, but I'm not necessarily sure when the content is things like names, if that distinguishing is as strong.
So I was experimenting with dealing with names in my previous iteration, my previous version that I built, which I decided was not something that I wanted to stick into this one. But so it was working with semicolons automatically there for name extraction without me intentionally having to ask it to do so. So I think you definitely, especially if there is a systematic set of rules and you want it to do this thing every time under these circumstances, you could definitely get it to do that for you. You might even be able, if you're working with normal ChatGPT and you don't want to bring your entire normal process into a custom GPT, you might be able to work on integrating a normal ChatGPT with a custom one to be like, okay, do this thing. Now, I mean, maybe you would have to take a spreadsheet from ChatGPT and put it into your custom one, but you could probably integrate it so that it would at least fix a lot of the problems for you. You can never guarantee that it's going to catch everything, and you're always going to have to review it, but you could probably lessen the annoyance and workload on you with this.
Okay, any more questions? We have an AI note taker telling us what its takeaways were. Not in the chat, but
That's me, sorry.
okay. Well, it sounds like we're probably done. So thank you all for coming. And
Thank you so much.
thank you, Josie, for the work and the presentation.
Thank you, Josie.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, looks like everybody's gone except, oh no, we still have 14 people left. I still don't see all the, for some reason. Oh, we're the only people with cameras on.
People are trickling out.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to shut down the meeting. I would we do a post-mortem, but there's still like 10 people on, so we won't do that today.
I thought it went great.
Yay.
Good job, Josie.
Great job. I thought you crushed it.
All
Bye,
right.
Dominique. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming, Dominic.
Of course. See you later.
Bye.